Oh, just a bit more on this UFO stuff as I'm sort of in the mood. I'm waiting for some paint to dry. This is Stephen Bassett on the right, Nick Pope on the left. There was a banner below Nick Pope a little while ago that said former UFO, former head of the UK UFO project, which is quite interesting, really. I mean, Nick Pope, when he first came out of the Ministry of Defence, said he was just the guy on the desk that took UFO reports, and he went from that to being the UK's Fox Mulder. He's out in the field investigating with Scully. And now he's the head of the former head of the UK UFO project. So what I mean about all this UFO stuff gets more and more embellished the longer it goes on. Okay, now I've actually watched this video. This is Steve Bassett, one of Kremlin Jones's mates, and I think this guy has swallowed all this stuff hook, line and sinker. And he's going to come down to earth, no pun intended, with a bump when he realises that none of what he's going to say here comes to fruition.
I believe we'll get a confirmation this summer. That confirmation is what I call disclosure with a capital D, formal acknowledgement by heads of state. It will be the most profound event in human history, and we will enter what I call the post-disclosure world. We may even have open contact in a year or two after that. That's about as interesting as it gets. And
Nick Pope's trying to stay awake. Look at him blinking.
and the answer to the question, what and how will we deal with that in the post-disclosure world, will fill 20, 30, 40,000 books. So I'm afraid it's not enough time to quite go into detail, but let's say it will be interesting and exciting, and I am just fortunate enough, I lived long enough to see it happen.
Stephen, if and when...
yeah, it won't happen this summer, it won't happen next summer, it won't happen in Stephen Bassett's lifetime, because it's not happening. You know, it's all science fiction nonsense. Okay, and with that, let's just have two quick clips, one from the Grusch interview and one from a Gary Nolan interview from a few weeks back. And we'll just have a look at the contradiction there is there. Okay, so the same people that are going to be feeding Grusch all this bloody nonsense are the same people that feed Gary Nolan with all this nonsense. Yet here are two very clear contradictions.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of...
Well, naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
Okay, so Grusch is saying that there are recovered alien beings. You know, they've recovered alien beings from these crashes. Personally, you know what I think of that. I think it's complete and utter codswallop. But now let's see what Gary Nolan has to say about it. Now remember, they feed Grusch this nonsense because they know Grusch can't analyse any biological samples. Now when they ask Gary Nolan the same question, he says, well, you know, do you really expect the aliens to send crewed vehicles here, you know? Vehicles with a crew in, you know, because he's some sort of biologist, and the first thing he would say is, I want those biological samples, you know. But they say to him, no, we don't have any biological samples. I'll just show you that clip from a Gary Nolan interview. Okay, now this is Gary Nolan, who's of course sitting on the results from Ross Coulthard's alien ball from Texas results. Because it's a ball check valve made in the USA. That's my opinion anyway. Now let's see what Gary Nolan has to say.
And then my experience with people who, frankly, I know have worked or are working on the reverse engineering programs.
He's saying exactly the same thing as Grusch. He knows people that tell him they're working on the reverse engineering programs. He's happy to accept that. He's a fanboy.
Okay, so let's take one step back. Reverse engineering programs
Of downed craft. Now, the first question that people will ask is, well, if they're so frigging advanced, why are they crashing? because what's crashing is not actual living things. I mean, I use this example a lot.
What's crashing is not actual living things. So they've told him that what's crashing is just probes. They're not vessels with crews. That's what they've told Grusch. But they're telling Nolan something completely different, because they know Nolan's a biologist, and Nolan will say, okay, you've got biological samples. I want to see them. I want to analyse those biological samples. So they tell Nolan something completely different. They tell him they're just probes, that they don't have crews. Now, regardless, I mean, even if it's an autonomous probe, again, the technology would be such that it's not going to come here and crash. I think it very unlikely that aliens would send probes here, simply because, depending on where they live, it could take 25,000 years to get the information the probe has collected back to its home planet, couldn't it, if it's 25 light years away? And that's a fairly local star. So I think the idea of probes, no, I really don't think so. Personal opinion, of course. But you can see that Grusch and Nolan, that they're both sort of well into this. They both lap up all this stuff. They're both saying that they know people that work on these programs, and they're saying completely different things in interviews. Nolan saying no living crews. Grusch is saying, yeah, we've recovered aliens, alien pilots. It's all over the place, this story, isn't it? It's complete and utter nonsense.
If you wanted to study a tribe of cannibals in the middle of the Amazon, are you going to go yourself and show up in the middle of the tribe and not hopefully become dinner on the other side of it?
This is a very simplistic analogy. You know, you'd send a drone to look at a tribe of cannibals rather than go and have a look at them yourself. But, you know, what are the chances of your drone falling out of the sky into their cauldron? You know, it's not very high, really, is it? So Nolan could have said here, hang on, what was that question again? Let's just go back to here.
Frankly, I know have worked or are working on the reverse engineering programs.
Okay, so let's take one step back. Reverse engineering programs
Of downed craft. Now, the first question that people will ask is, well, if they're so frigging advanced, why are they?
Yeah, okay. But there was another bit in this interview where the guy asks him if directly if he's been working on any of this stuff, and he goes all around the houses, but the answer is no. He's not. He has no first-hand experience. Steve Bassett says he has. You know, in Steve Bassett's head, this guy is working on recovered alien materials. Yet Nolan himself said he isn't. Steve Bassett believes the Roswell story. You know, how many times has that been debunked? Mogul balloon number 4. He believes aliens were recovered at Roswell. Steve Bassett. So Steve Bassett is going to be in for a very rough ride, because, you know, you can see by looking at him he's knocking on a bit. And he said in his the clip earlier that he's just glad that he lived long enough to see disclosure. Well, you know, he's not going to see disclosure. It's not going to happen. There are no recovered alien spacecraft. There are no recovered alien bodies. And it's people like Steve Bassett, Gary Nolan and David Grusch that just lap all this science fiction nonsense up, and they're perfectly happy to accept all these stories without seeing any evidence whatsoever. No tangible evidence. All right, well, that's just another quickie from me. I just thought it was worth showing you that contradiction there. Because, you know, they're going to be fed these stories by the same people, Grusch and Nolan. And they're telling us completely different things. You know, Nolan saying, you know, we don't have any. They're not going to send crewed vehicles with crews. Grusch is saying, yeah, oh yeah, we've recovered alien pilots. You can see how this story is all over the place, and it's all completely and utterly science fiction. There will be no UFO disclosure. Sorry, Mr. Bassett, you better go and stock up on your antidepressants. you will not be seeing disclosure in your lifetime. Nor will any of us, I suspect. Okay, just a short one. Thanks for watching. Maybe catch you again.